Hey folks, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project YouTube, copyrighted edition. And we're back in the good old silo. Weather outside is pretty nice. It's in the high 30s, no wind. Decent day in Montana. First of all, I hope everyone had a great New Year's and happy holidays. And let's hope 2021 is going to be a little better than 2020 was. And the next week should be interesting to everybody. Pay special attention to what happens in Washington. Who knows? So, a couple of things that came up in the last week that I wanted to talk about. A lot of questions about, hey Dave, why don't you go on so-and-so's podcast? Or, hey Dave, why don't you ask so-and-so if you can go on a show? I've never done that. Other people have done that, but I've never done that. And I'm not going to do that. People have solicited for me, like the executive VP of the distribution company for the movies has asked me to be on Rogan's show many times. They won't have me on, as I've said, but I don't care about that. Other people have said, hey, why don't you go on this podcast or that podcast? I've learned that if I go on somebody's show and they're not vested in the topic, they don't really know much about it, it's a boring show. It's that dialogue back and forth between myself and the host that makes it interesting. And to have read a book or to watch all my videos, something along those lines makes it a good show. But if I ask to be on it, then people don't like to do the work. If you notice, the people that have the really good podcasts are educated on the topic they're talking about. And they're not, oh yeah, wow, uh-huh, yeah, uh-huh. You get this from a lot of shows where some of the people really don't put a lot of effort into it. So, a few statistics for you guys. Last year, I gained 135,000 subscribers, which, according to my friends that have over 1 million subscribers, that is not a good rate of growth. And nobody can believe it. I can't believe it, based on how these other podcasts are growing. And again, frustration. Some people have said, Dave, how do I find you on Parler? So I'm migrating away from Twitter. I'm going to Parler. And Parler is a site that's partially owned by a friend of mine from the Secret Service. I shouldn't say a friend, a person who I follow from the Secret Service. And he has guaranteed that that site will stay free and open and won't have censorship. And from what I've seen so far, there is no censorship. And that's what I'm looking for. If you go to David Paulides at Missing 411 on Parler, you'll find me. I'm slowly migrating from Twitter. I'm still looking for some other location where I can put my videos up. You will know before I do it, promise. Now today, what I'm going to talk about is a series of disappearances involving 2 women and 1 man. And people say, oh, how come all your victims are Caucasian? And there's some racist twist to 411 that I don't appreciate. And if you look at my videos, I've done at least 3 videos about black people that have disappeared in the wilderness. And today we're going to talk about an Asian woman that disappeared in the wilderness. So I report the facts. I'm not trying to just do this race or that race. I don't care. And it's insulting that somebody even brings that up. So I'm disgusted by that talk. So, first case we're going to talk about is probably one of the hottest topics right now in the last month and a half, 2 months on the news about somebody who's gone missing in the Pyrenees Mountains in Spain and France, right on the border. A woman named Esther Dingley, 37 years old, and she was on a 6-year camping trip with her boyfriend, Dan Colgate. And both were from Durham in the UK. They had their dogs, and they had jobs. They met in college. They quit their jobs in 2014, decided to tour Europe. And they met studying at Wadham College in the UK, in Oxford. Smart people. And they got just frustrated with their normal ho-de-do life and decided that they were going to put their dogs and themselves in a camper van and tour Europe. And they were on their way, and Dan suffered some medical conditions along the way. And Esther decided to continue on to Spain and that border of France and do some hiking and climbing through there. And she was last seen November 22nd at 4 p.m. on Salvagard Mountain, which is right on that border. And she tweeted, or she sent Dan a photo of herself from that location. That was confirmed. And she started a hike towards Benasque, Spain. And it wasn't a hard hike at all. And there's video footage online of Spain and France doing a helo search of the area. Lots of granite, lots of boulders, wide open, hardly any vegetation. And they found her car. She was supposed to be out of that area in a couple days. She didn't. Dan and the family contacted local police. They started to search. They found her car. Everything was out as it should be. They've searched for weeks and they haven't found her. This is what Esther looks like. And you can find her online. But Dan and Esther have been together for 18 years. Dan's been questioned multiple times by the police. He validated, and others could validate where he was during that time and their communication back and forth. Esther was traveling alone during just a 30-day cycle. And they were going to get back together. And she was described as a super experienced hiker, super smart, savvy. And in the past several years, they've lived in France, Switzerland, Austria, Italy, Slovenia, and Liechtenstein. Sort of European world travelers. Now, just lately, within the last couple of weeks, it started to snow on that border area. And they gave up the search, from what I can tell. Now, there's a press agency that's handling the information on Esther. There's a couple things that were interesting in the press release I wanted to bring up. This is what her parents said. It is utterly out of character for her to be out of contact for this length of time. We are missing her desperately. Esther values family above everything else. And on all her trips, she's in regular contact. We were missing each other. The hike went on. We hope to have her back soon. There was some statement by the police who spoke to a journalist that implied things weren't as happy as it looked between her and Dan. Not true. Family adamantly denied it. He and his friends denied it. Dan spoke every day with the police, just about. He's been quizzed 3 times. They've been a couple since 2002. She only crossed into Spain because the French announced a new lockdown. So the only way she could get into the mountains was to go through Spain. She spent November 20th in the motorhome, set out November 21st. Terrain's not difficult. Esther specified her route from the summit we spoke about. She had 2 hours of daylight to reach her refuge, a winter room, a distance that would have taken her less than an hour. From our own visits, I know she wouldn't have had a phone signal again until Sunday afternoon. If Esther did have an accident, it would have been in the very small area between the car and this shelter. LBT Global is handling the information on the case. So again, I'm going to talk today about a few things that concern me. And first of all, I don't care where you are in the world, you should be carrying a personal locator beacon. Esther did tell Dan and her family exactly when she was leaving, exactly when she'd be out. They had this exact parameter of time and location to search. Where she is, that's $1 million mystery. And that's why it's gotten so much press in the world. I don't have a lot of cases out of this area. In fact, I have very few. So it's not a cluster area, but it does fit it in a lot of ways. I hope Esther's found. And as this weather's gotten worse, the chances of her being found alive are very minimal. LBT Global, you can follow them on Facebook. They've had lots of posts about this case. And I hope the family and Dan know that you guys out there And I am hoping for a good outcome on this. Next cases involve an area in Oregon right on the Washington border. Multnomah Falls, 30 miles east of Portland, Oregon. And you spell that Multnomah. I've been to it multiple times. It is stunningly gorgeous. It's adjacent to the Columbia River. Columbia River empties out parts of Washington and Oregon. I fished on the Columbia for sturgeon and salmon. Great fishing. And gorgeous, beautiful area. It's on Highway 84 as you exit Portland. You follow the Columbia River. If you've never been into that area, it's a gorgeous drive, worth taking. And it's about 20 miles from Mount Hood to the northwest. Lost Lake Resort, interesting name, is between Multnomah Falls and Mount Hood. Mount Hood's a location where I've written about many people, that and the area around it, that have disappeared and have never been found. The falls gets about 2.5 million visitors annually. Just almost straight north of the falls is Mount St. Helens, and about 15 miles east of Mount St. Helens is Mount Adams, that if you Google it, lots of strange stuff goes on there. So this whole area, very odd. So the first case I'm going to tell you about is one I've written about extensively. It's a case regarding James McCormick Jr. December 5th, 1961, 16 years old. His dad was a Portland firefighter, and on December 4th, 1961, they went bobcat hunting with their dog into an area between Larch Mountain and the falls. Area is super rugged, super wild, and not a lot going on out there people-wise. So as they went in that morning, they were going to be out late that night, they encountered heavy rain. And it was super heavy rain. And that area of Portland and Washington, when it rains heavy, it's like a tropical rain. Not warm, but it's thick. So during that time, when they were trying to get out, they got lost. And James Jr., according to his dad, became delirious. How many times have I written about this? If you've read Missing 411 Hunters, the number of times that people are together in the woods and one person gets sick and they have to split up, I lost count. There are many. And what would cause a 16-year-old to be delirious in the woods? He had no known medical and mental health issues. James carried his 215-pound son for 3 hours trying to get him out, and they were lost. So they're in an area behind the falls somewhere, and James Sr. said that he thought he saw car lights. So in that thick forest, you're not going to see car lights unless you're right on the road, and they weren't. And there's only a few dirt roads in that area, and no one's going to be driving in the middle of the night out there. But he says he saw car lights. So he told his son to stay put, and he started walking towards what he thought were car lights. And a day later, he stumbles into the lodge at Multnomah Falls, exhausted, dehydrated, and completely whipped. He explained what happened, and immediately 200 off-duty Portland firefighters responded. And along with the local sheriff's department, a massive search was entailed. Now, the dog stayed with James Sr. and made it back to the falls. Sheriff's office put canines into the woods, and a day and a half into the search, they found James Jr.'s boots and some other articles, socks, just laying on the ground. Find that suspicious. Now, they searched some more, and they were using canines. Canines weren't picking up a scent. Canines weren't finding James Jr. But a firefighter down a cliff 300 yards from the body found James Jr. deceased. Now, They said it was 75 feet from the Franklin Ridge Trail, close. And at the initial offset, the people on the scene didn't believe he fell from the fall. And some other people thought that maybe he was hypothermic and died. So remember, James Jr. was delirious, meaning he couldn't walk straight. His dad told him to stay put. They'd come right back to that area. So how could he get up and move? And why would he get up and move if he did get up and move? So the coroner came back and said he died of hypothermia, not from the fall. Didn't even describe any of the injuries. But I'll show you this. So the top picture, this is the rescue crews pulling James Jr. out of the woods on a single wheel emergency retrieval unit. And the bottom was James Sr. when he was pulled out of the falls. Yeah, the case bothers me a lot. And I know the dad did the right thing in those circumstances. His son was delirious. He wasn't getting help. They weren't out. His son couldn't move. He was exhausted. He couldn't carry his son anymore. He had to make a tough decision. Now, thinking about that tough decision for a minute. Personal locator beacon. This is why you have one. You stay together. When people split up, bad things happen. He didn't have a backpack. He didn't have emergency supplies, and I don't blame the dad. I'm telling you, this is a learning experience for you. So, always carry a backpack. Always, always, always. Always carry an emergency blanket that you can get into. And these things weigh less than a pound. They're waterproof, and they will save your life. Always carry a whistle. Always carry some type of fire starter. I personally like a Bic lighter because there's a constant flame. And you carry something, I've talked about this, I think, before, but I'm going to talk about it again, is you carry lint. Now, people are going to laugh. Ah, yeah, well, this is going to save your life, folks. This lint bag weighs nothing to put in your backpack. This comes out of your lint container in your dryer. Now, why lint? Because it is a great fire starter. That's right. So, take a little lint and put it on the ground, and you put this below where you want to put your kindling. But this doesn't burn like wildly, but it burns consistently. And it's a great way to start a small fire in an area where you might have difficulty finding dry substance. Now, there's a lot of trees in the Pacific Northwest that have a certain moss that is also really good to start a fire with. So, there is your survival lesson for the day. Carry lint, put it in a bag, and I don't care where you're at. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to find a fire starter. I just found it for you. And it costs nothing, it weighs nothing, and it's one of those things you're foolish if you don't carry it. You may not find this in a lot of survival manuals, but I'm telling you, it works. All right. Case number 3 involves a lady from Portland. The McCormicks were from Portland. Alissa McCrann, 37 years old, December 19th, 2015. She liked to run, she liked to hike. Earlier that day, she was running in her neighborhood, came back, took a shower. She had a 13-year-old son at the time, and her son lived at her parents' house in Portland. Kevin McCrann was her dad. So she told him that she was going to hike on Multnomah Falls. She drove over there. She had no medical, mental health issues. She was a good person, solid mom. And she was supposed to meet friends for a hike on December 20th. She didn't show up. On December 21st, she didn't show up for work. People got concerned. People called the police. They eventually did find her black 2011 Mazda parked at the falls. And the search started on December 22nd. Immediately deployed canines on the trail. Didn't find any scent trail. It was snowing at the time that the search started and continued to snow for the next several days. The local sheriff's department did find a witness on December 19th that saw Alissa on the trail. Good spirits, everything was good, but they said that she was alone and nobody was with her and nobody was following her. So the sheriff did a good job finding witnesses, putting canines up, putting helicopters up. The parents, Kevin was on the scene, searched the trail several days with his family. And in January 2016, a month after Alissa disappeared, local sheriff's department put in multiple cadaver dogs up into that area. Cadaver dogs can smell a dead body sometimes miles away, and they came up with nothing. So it's been, 5 years, 6 years since this happened, and they've never found Alissa. Concerning. This area of the falls, not an easy trail to get lost on. There have been searches there for lost people before that were found. This is one of the few, them in the McCormick's case, where it had a bad ending. Now, if you're Kevin McCrann and you just lost your daughter, how could things get any worse for you? July 25th, 2017, about 2.5 years after Alissa disappeared, a residence on North Kirby Street in Portland was owned by her brother, and Matt McCrann, 42 years old. And on July 25th, the Portland Fire Department responded to an explosion at the house. They get out there and they immediately find a resident inside the home deceased, and they find a contractor that was doing long-term work at the house deceased. And initially, the firefighters said that they thought that it was a gas explosion that tore apart this house. And then after an investigation, they found that it was a hash oil explosion. Not funny. And Matt McCrann was found that day in his backyard by a neighbor, and he talked to him briefly. He was taken to a hospital. He later died. So in 2.5 years, Kevin McCrann had his son die and his daughter disappear. And now they're left raising Alissa's young son. Well, the son now would be 18 years old. And if the son watches this, I want you to know that I have a heavy heart for the loss of your mom and the loss of your uncle. And the grandparents, I know, are in a tough position raising a young person like this. So I think it's important that we as a society try to help as much as we can on these instances. And what I mean by that, if you live in the Portland area, keep your eyes open on that trail. Sometimes we go off trail, keep your eyes open for unusual things. If you're ever on a trail, I don't care where you're at, and somebody strikes you as unusual, I want you to call the police. So that is Alissa McCrann. At the time she disappeared, she was 37 years old, and that's the car that they found at the Multnomah Falls trail head. Now, that area, lots of water, tons of water. Obviously, it's the falls, and there's a lot of rain. And yet the Columbia River, less than 1/8 of a mile away. All very close. Now, the reason I brought up this point about if you're on a trail and you see somebody really odd, call the police, because there's going to be somebody else coming up that trail behind you. Don't just shuck it off and say, I'm not going to call. I was hiking way up in Northern California one time, way out in the middle of nowhere at the state park. And I was by myself, and I'm on this trail, and these two guys are walking down the trail, and I step off to the side, and they step off to the side, maybe out 7 or 8 feet from me, and they go, what are you doing here? I said, what? I said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm on a hike in a state park. You need to turn around. And they had guns. They could have killed me and left me for dead right there. And I said, but this is a state park. You need to turn around. So I know a lot of times in instances like this, people stop to lose their, and forget their common sense. Common sense says, turn around and leave, which I did. But before I left, I made some mental notes about these two men. And to me, it looked like they had been in the woods for a long time. They were dirty. One was Hispanic, one was Caucasian. Caucasian guy was talking, good English. But I made mental notes exactly what they were wearing. I got back to my truck, wrote down all the notes I could find, immediately went to the state park headquarters and told them. And they were concerned. And there was a state park policeman there, and he took all the notes, and he said, okay, should I go up there right now? I go, no. Get like 3 or 4 guys to go up there, but don't one person go up there. That's too dangerous. It'd kill you, and you wouldn't have any help. He goes, you're right. So I know that he was calling for extra assistance, and they were going to be there in an hour and a half, 2 hours. That's what you want to do, because I don't want somebody else suffering the consequences of these idiots. Now, at the time, there were a lot of marijuana grows up there. I knew that. And that's probably why they were keeping me out of the area. I was a little more clean shaven, didn't have a goatee, just had a mustache. I probably looked like a cop. But yeah, don't mess around with people. Just do what they say, politely turn around and leave. And don't take out your smartphone and take a picture of them. Don't do anything stupid. If you have a GPS device, make a mental note of the GPS coordinates where you were stopped at and leave. And I never did go back to that area, and it wasn't that big of a deal for me, but it did bother me a lot. A few other things is on the McCormick and on the McCrann case. Interesting, that some people would say they're both Irish names, even though Alissa was obviously Asian. On the Dingley case, UK person, I've often said that to pay close attention where these people come from. Well, both McCormick and McCrann came from that Portland area. I'm heartbroken to say that I've never heard almost anything about the McCrann case since it happened. There was one article that said 5 years from the incident. There's still nothing about the case. That was it. But all the wanted posters about these incidents, when someone disappears, they're always taken down within a few months. And they really don't want, I mean, in parts of Yosemite, if you went in there, there could be 20, 30 wanted posters on a board. You don't see any. And that's the problem. Because people go in, I use the expression, dumb and happy. They don't realize what they're walking into. They don't realize the associated dangers. They haven't checked the weather to see what's coming, and they just go in there thinking they're going to have a great day. I always wish that you do have a great day hiking. I'm very blessed to have you guys as my friends and my followers. I will say this once again, I am still getting tons of email and tons of notes about people being unsubscribed to the channel. Check. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. There's something odd going on here, and I don't know what it is, but I know on my channel specifically, hundreds, if not thousands of you have been unsubscribed. So, frustrating. So, that's the Missing 411 Can-Am Missing Project for today. Thank you. If everything's right and the river flows and the winds blow the right way, I will be back next week. Thank you, and have a great day.